My name is Sophia. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit further. But today, I'm going to hold a presentation of how does your startup become truly data-driven. And during the Q&A, we also have William, my co-founder as well at Stockholm Strat Lab, to also answer your questions in the chat box, but also later on when we come to the Q&A. And you can also say a little bit or wink. Nice. So let's begin. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about who I am. And one of the things that I realized when preparing for this talk, or for being a part of UPPSTART this year, was that when we have had so many digital interactions, you kind of forget to tell you about yourself. So I thought that I would share a little bit who I am and what I enjoy. So I love making kick-ass Napolitan pizzas. I've been practicing this almost throughout the pandemic, just to make the perfect dough so I can make the perfect pizza. I love spending time on the water. I love paddling, kayaking during the summers, during the short periods of time in Sweden when you can actually do that. I co-founded Stockholm Strat Lab in 2020, March the 20th, which is super easy to remember. And I will tell you a little bit more about that journey as well. I used to resell valuable sneakers, but now I just keep them to myself. It's a guilty pleasure, and a very expensive guilty pleasure at times. So that is a little bit about me and what I enjoy. And I hope that can be also somewhat of a conversation starter later on if we have time to mingle. So we're going to, we only have 20 minutes. So I'm going to give you a introduction to who we are and what we do. And afterwards, we're going to talk about what is being data-driven. It's a topic we've heard quite a lot about, but I think it's nice to align ourselves. What does that mean, or how do we look at it? We're going to talk about why is it important, as well as look at process, culture, and tech being the foundation stones to this. And then we're going to have Q&A. If you feel that some parts are not going, or if you feel that you have questions, you can ask them in the Q or in the chat box, and William to my right will answer your questions. And we're going to have time as well during the Q&A to dig deeper into the topics, because these are big topics and we have short amount of time to actually get an overview over it. So what we work with. One of the main things that we encounter on a daily basis is that we have organizations or companies that say, you know, we have data everywhere. And they often are, you know, we're often encountering that we want to work with data, we want to become data driven. And one of the main questions I ask them is, what do you hope to achieve? Which is one of the most important questions to remind yourself when we hear those buzzwords just going around on LinkedIn and everyone is hashtagging and talking about it, is that we need to remember, working with data, you have to also have a sense of why behind it. And the most common answer I receive is, we want to sell more, or we need everyone to just start working with our data. And then the roles flip, because I start to ask them, okay, but how do you collect your data today? What kind of process enables you or enables your team or coworkers to work with data? And you see the roles flip. Then you start to understanding that working with data is a bigger transformation, or it's a commitment you have to make with a strong vision of having a clear goal. And just working with data is not efficient enough. We have to understand what kind of approach we have to create within the organization to start achieving it. And this is basically what we do at Strat Lab. We work with helping organizations work with data, and also becoming analytics driven. But we have also separated into parts where we focus on the tech, we focus on the human, your consumers and users, as well as the process. How do we actually take these insights to real actions? And then we also do implementation on that. And the most important parts is, if you look at just a modern data stack, I'm not going to go into much to our packaging today because I'm going to focus on the topic, but just to we get an understanding. The modern data stack is what enables organizations or your company to be able to get a modern business intelligence in your organization that is basically collecting, visualizing, and organizing your data into one place. While working with Smart CX is visualizing the journey that goes from a customer or a user knowing about your brand to actually purchasing and what happens afterwards. But here with Smart CX, we talk a lot about work towards making that journey in real time. So you receive real-time data points on that. And then strategy is basically understanding what kind of parts in that journey do we have to optimize, and how can we start implementing those optimizations. So that is the full picture of what we do. And one of the things that is super important is that why do we do what we do? And this is also going back to why do we want to work with data, etc. And this picture, this image, some of you might have seen it before, and some of you, could be the first time you've seen it. But what this elephant represents is the challenge you have within your organization or within your company. It represents the challenge you're facing, but you're not sure what you're looking at. You have someone looking at one part and seeing, oh, it's probably a spear, or it feels like a spear. And someone else feels the tail in the back and says, oh, well, I think this is a rope. And this exemplifies not only startup, but as well as bigger organizations that we've worked with and working with have a struggle to understand and create a common truth about the challenge that you have. So data and working with data is about creating a common truth about your challenges rather than just doing it or going with your gut feeling. It's about truly understanding where you have to actually continue to work. And I want to throw ourselves right into an example, a real life example. And what you're looking at right now is it's a project, an early project where we worked with a gym that had some challenges. They were not sure what kind of challenges they had, but they wanted they wanted to keep their customers. That was the challenge. They had an issue of having recurrent members, and this graph is actually an outcome of when we worked with them. And on the top there, you see where we did a test, and we want to ask the question why? Why does it look like that? Because data is not only collecting the quantitative, it's also working with the qualitative. We have to also find a ways to understand the why behind the numbers. So this graph, in short, shows their sales during a couple of weeks. So yeah, it's a gym concept. They have 1,000 different members located in Sweden. And they also have an app where their members can book classes, rebook, and more. And the goal was to increase recurring members and increase also lifetime value. And going back to one of the foundations is to working with data is not only working with your internal data, but it's a lot about also working to combine your internal with your external information about your customers and your consumers. And an example here is a very simplified version of a customer journey where you have a before state, a during phase, and after. And before is representing, for example, getting to know or getting aware about that your company exists. During is talking about that you've done a purchase and you are a member of the gym and you're using your membership. And after being when your membership is expiring and or when your membership expiring, what happens afterwards, etc. And through there, you have multiple interactions. And we identified over 50 unique touch points between the driving activities and the target audience that led to them coming back another semester and continuing with their membership. And one of the things also working with quantitative and qualitative information is that in the before state, and this is also very broken down, as you can see, but in a before stage, we were understanding that they were seeking change. And knowing that, we start to look at what kind of data and KPIs are showing us what kind of actions they take based on that drive of seeking change. During, we wants to be rewarded, feel rewarded. So again, we looked at what kind of KPIs and data are showing us how we can identify their actions that are correlating with that statement. And then again, after, the same thing, the feeling of happiness and fulfillment. But also working with that and having that, it becomes very interesting, because then you start to ask yourself, how can we use these different triggers to make an effect? So what we did and what we tested was that during that high, when they're feeling fulfillment and happiness after a workout, and also being their last day of the membership, we sent a push notification out where we rewarded them for to continue their membership with a gift discount. And as you can see, it was a very, very high amount of members that renewed their membership right away. And I'm going to just quickly move forward. And one of the goals that was to increase the total lifetime value, which we saw an increase for over time, as well as we increased the number of members with 20%, as well reduced the churns by 13%. And we can talk more about it as well in the Q&A if you want to know more detail about the case. But I want to go back again to why data is so important. And one of the things as startups or any organization is that you have limited resources. So when you know how to invest your resources, if it's money or time or both, then you want to, of course, maximize the number of good investment and minimize the number of bad ones. Even if that is a simple thing to say, I mean, I sit down with very, very big organizations, and still this is a reminder for them. And one of the ways of doing and ensuring that is that you have good, truthful picture of what you are going to do and what you're going to invest in. And you need to locate where your biggest challenges lies. And data is truth, and the challenges that you often encounter, and challenges we often encounter, is that you also get to the point that you have a lot of data, but it becomes difficult to use it in a simple, efficient way. And your technical growth, meaning that your data that you're not using, it just continues to grow because you're also not getting the data is not getting used for what it's intended for. And what you want to achieve, and this is going back to that what I also started off in this talk, is the importance of knowing what you want to achieve, and that can also define what you're looking for as well. So if you have a set goal, you want to be able to measure it. You want to know if you have achieved it or not. You can have, for example, have, if we're going to have a super simple example of using revenue as a goal, and this number you can easily see in your bank account, or you can easily see that. I'm just gonna drink some water because I'm feeling my mouth getting dry. There we go. No, but you can easily see that in your bank account, and this KPI does not stand alone. You can break it down in even further, in further, bits and pieces. So, for example, what happened before you received the amount of money in your account? Basically, you made a sale. Okay, so then you break that down. How many people do you need to talk to or need to have on your website to convert to a sale? And then you go on further and further, breaking down those goals as long as you feel it is meaningful to smaller components. And your data and what you're looking at in data will differ and will change depending on how the further down you go, the more data, the KPIs will differ, etc. And one of the things also working with data to expand or to optimize is totally different. And all of a sudden you continue to break down these different components as far as possible. Then you start to see that you need to explore how your whole new area, such as expand, or if you need to optimize what you already have. So, for example, expand meaning that you find an area where you want to launch a marketing campaign, or it is you've used your already existing marketing campaign to analyze and utilize it and make it better than it already is. And I think that is one of the most common things that when companies or organizations ask us, okay, but we want to optimize. I think everyone comes to us and asks us, please optimize. But as soon as we start breaking down the KPIs and the numbers, we start to see that the issue is not optimized. There is an issue of understanding and wanting to an area where we have to expand. And when I think this difference is something that you have to really, really look for and be careful, because sometimes it's not just throwing money into optimization, but sometimes it's also expanding a part of your business. And these are the stepping stones, more or less, in this. This is what we work with on a daily basis. But how do you really achieve it in reality? And it's broken down into three parts, which is process, culture, and tech. Process talks a lot about creating the framework of how data plays a role in your day-to-day. Culture is a product of process. And I think a lot of people don't think about culture being a product of process. But reality is that when we start working with data, when you start looking into your organization, what kind of process enables you to work with data? And those processes and those frameworks that you create will then afterwards result in a culture over time, because culture is only a product of process. And then you have the tech. And tech talks about enabling you to receive and collect data, rather than being your solution. It's more of an enabler for you to work with data on a day-to-day basis. And how do we work towards the goal? And this is a deep dive into looking into the process. The importance of looking, and I will go back to the case as well that I showed you guys, and that is, you have to understand that the values that are created in your organization or within your company needs to also be correlated with what kind of values are created for your end user, or if it's your customer or your audience, etc. you have to understand what are their behaviors, what kind of values are created to achieve that end goal. From there, you can start identifying what kind of KPIs are affecting those different values. How are our customers or users taking one step to another? What kind of KPI is connected in between those two? Also, this is where you can also start identifying gaps, information gaps, and also gaps of data that you don't actually have, but you realize this type of information is what we need to have to understand how we can optimize or expand our business. And then also develop a logic around it. And logic basically makes this framework is the thing that creates the framework. And this is just an example of that journey. For example, you identify step 1, 2, 3 to 8, but in step 4 you realize you have that type of information gap. And it's super interesting because this is an easy task you can also do internally, to just identify what do we know and what don't we know. What kind of information, numbers, or data is connected with those different steps. You can see if you have the key figures, if it's different functions within the organization, what kind of cost is also correlated with these different steps. And this is basically the first step for you to start creating that process that will enable you to develop and being able to optimize and work with data efficiently. Let's talk culture. There's a lot, I've heard this change mindset quite a lot, so I'm putting it against enabling mindset. And I think it goes back to talking about using technology also as an enabler. It's the same when it comes to culture. We need to enable people to firstly have trust, receive trust, so get support, and also support sharing, as well as develop data champions. And if we look at from backwards, you can see that developing champions, identifying those people that are very, very, even have ambitions to work with data and have a mindset of wanting to do and do a lot and wanting to do more, etc. Use those people to support sharing, because if we have real examples and having colleagues or a culture of sharing what people do, we also get inspired, and it will be highly more efficient if we can create our own feeling of achievement within the company. And the ones that also are the data champions in the company, they also can feel a sense of reward, of also being uplifted, and yeah. And I think nurture trust is one of the, if we go one step further, nurture trust is one of the most important things as well when it comes to transparency and ownership and prediction. And I think that is one of the most thing I encounter with organizations that are a bit bigger and they've existed quite a lot. Sometimes data can feel quite scary, especially if we don't have a sense of trust within the organization. Then data can feel like a panopticon, like we're looking and seeing everything you're doing, rather than using and being able to say, you get to receive this information and data, and you get to use this so you can be better at your work, or so you can experiment, and it's okay to fail as well, as long as you know the why behind it. So this is quite a big a challenge, but I think if you continue to work both with champions and nurturing trust, as well as by sharing, I think you have a great stepping stone to it. Nope. There we go. And let's talk tech. And one of the main things that we do quite a lot as well, and one of the things that is on the on the top, a lot of people talk about today is how we shorten time from insight to action. Because a lot of organizations or teams or companies, they work very siloed in their own departments or in their own roles, or and the way they report is quite traditional through Excel, or yeah, I can imagine, putting in numbers in Excel each week or each month and sharing it during a meeting within your team or within your organization. And one of the things that is, has grown quite a lot is how do we work rather with gathering data, not only from each the department, but also from all the departments. How do we actually blend the data together to get a full picture of the elephant, as I was talking about before, and not only one part of the elephant? We have to understand the whole organization, and by doing that, you have to gather all data in one cloud, so you can actually analyze the data and being able to share it, so you get a better picture of how you can work with it. And some of the tools, because I was also told to show some tools as an example. So I know that Google Data Studios is for free, but this is the other ones are some of the tools that we use to gather data, analyze, and share. So we use Tableau, which is a visualization tool to visualize your data, as well as Google Data Studios is also a tool for that, that you can have a look at and check out. And Snowflake and Fivetran. Fivetran is a connector, as well as Snowflake is a cloud where you can collect the data. And that is very simplified also. I have no idea how much time I have left, but I think I Yep. So to summarize it, working with data is, I would say, going from zero to something. I think starting off, you're saying, I want to know everything is an inefficient way of going about it. So start with understanding, what do I want to know? What do we know today? And just make that journey and understand, what do we know today about our organizations, about our customers, and try to, break down each step, as well as find the gaps. What do we want to know, but we don't have that information? And let's Q&A. I think that I was supposed to have a link to send to the Q&A room.
Got a link in the chat from Karin.
Nice, we got a link in the chat.
So I'm going to try and go there. Let's see what happens.
And I'll let William be the test bunny for this.
Yeah, but I think this. Yeah. So let's see. A bit unclear. Like, what is? Can't we just do the Q&A here?
The question is, can't we do the Q&A in the chat?
I don't know. I see that Karin is still here. Can we get an answer, Karin? Unclear. But we have a question from Martin. So what are key errors I can make in working with data? Is it possible to collect the wrong data? So it's absolutely possible to collect the wrong data. But what becomes important is the better you understand where your your goal, and you understand what are the issues or challenge that is facing you or is between you and your goal. Like, the better you understand that, the better you can research and both understand the problem, but also understand what are the key factors and that will impact your result, and then collect the data according to that. So I hope that answered your question. And we have another question directly. How do I avoid getting ripped off by data farms? I guess it's the same thing as always. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So I don't know. Do you have any other advice there?
Yeah, it sounded correct.
We have another question. So from Linda, at what point should a startup begin thinking of data? That's a great question. So I think, at least in my opinion, as early as possible. But the factor that you always have to think of is it has to be meaningful, and it has to be like, don't just spend your time, don't only spend your time into collecting data, analyzing it, and then try to do something, because that will probably, or it could eat all of your time. So it's more important to find your focus, and then like right there, look, how can you collect data around that, and how can you analyze it in order to make sure that you're taking a better result, or a better action. And the same thing goes. I think the same thing goes in general with that. Like finding the place, and the challenge, and then using the data that you have in order to take a better decision. And as Sophia finished with, it's better to have something than nothing. And having everything is almost always impossible, even for the super, super big companies. Would you like to add anything there?
No, I think that is a great way to put it, especially for startups. We had a conversation not too long ago as well with a startup, and I think just having an idea of what kind of values your company is creating for your users or your customers is also a beautiful way of understanding and understanding how you can collect information and collect data. So also deep diving into that. If you don't have quantitative as well data, you can always go about using the qualitative way of collecting that common truth, which is what is the activities that are creating creating sales today. And that could be as easy as collecting the information through your customers or your users.
Then actually there's another part of it as well, that I think is super important, and like putting or finding the culture early, and then being able to scale on that, I think is better, like working with a data culture from as early as possible, because basically what happens if you don't is that you will build based, and like in the worst case, you will build probably based on like who is the authority, or who has the highest pay, and they will take the decision. And trying to change that when you are like 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 people will be super hard. So it's easier to find that culture, and just being aware that the best kind of decision is based on data, as far as it's possible to go, and as long as it's meaningful.
Data culture, tough one. What is that? And I think it's a combination, as I talked about, creating the right process for your team or your organization to actually work with information and your data. Because I think one of the biggest challenges as well is that not everyone understands the value of data in their own day-to-day. So I think having both educating as well as William talked about, creating a awareness that it's not about looking and measuring the performance of each coworker. So sorry, I started reading your next sentence. So making it key in your club. Yeah, basically. But making it easy to try and test and dare to fail if it's about trying to test or yeah. But I would say it's not easy. That's why I would say often go and look at your process, because that would enable the why. So later on, if someone is doing something else and don't think it's valuable to work with data, you have actually a process that shows that, well, this is how we work because da 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 da. So I don't know. I think process is the easiest way to create it. Yeah.
We have a last question, and it's from Linda again, which is, what practical steps can be taken to strengthen the data department of your organization? Which is also a super question. And also, of course, super dependent on your data department. But where I would say that you should start looking in order to try to identify that is to look at the 3 different steps that Sophia talked about. So process or strategy, you have culture, and then you have tech. And trying to find where can we become even better. So is it a question of we don't know what data we should be looking at? Then it's probably process and strategy. So then I would start looking there. If it's a question of we have all of this data, we get it super fast, but at the end of the day, we're still taking a decision based on a gut feeling or what the boss says. Then it's a question of culture. So how can you create a better data culture? And the last one is, of course, tech. So say that you have a super understanding of what kind of data you should be looking at, and you are also super keen to take a data-driven decision, but your insight to action is like a week to a month, something like that. Then your challenge lays within the technical aspect, and that's where you should start looking at in order to improve your data department. And I think with that answer, I hope I answered your questions there, Linda. But with that, our time is up. And I think I talked for both of us when I say super big thanks. And if you have any more questions or just want to connect with us, we are both on LinkedIn. And I think we can even send our LinkedIn profiles in the chat.